Right. Let's kick off this deep dive. We're going to be looking at some early scientific inquiry today, and in particular, the work of Aristotle.
Aristotle.
Yeah, you probably know him as the philosopher, right?
Right.
But this guy, he was a total science geek, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We've got a bunch of his writings all about animals.
Okay.
So, like, super detailed observations from him,
Oh.
some pretty interesting interpretations in there as well.
Yeah.
We've even got a bit of poetry from him.
Interesting.
And to help us kind of unpack it all, we've got some analysis and historical context from scholars who've studied Aristotle's work, in the centuries since.
What's really cool is that we're going way back
Yeah.
to like the very beginnings of zoology, really, with Aristotle.
Yeah.
I mean, this is way before microscopes or any of the fancy tools we have today, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're peering into the mind of one of the very first people to try and systematically understand
Yeah.
the animal kingdom.
Exactly.
Mhm.
His main thing was this book called History of Animals.
Okay.
You wouldn't believe how much he documented. I mean, we're talking anatomy, behavior, even the reproductive habits
Oh, wow.
of like hundreds of species.
He was dedicated.
This guy was serious.
Yeah, his approach, it was really ahead of its time.
Totally.
I mean, he was all about direct observation. And he actually tried to categorize animals based on their common characteristics.
That's so interesting.
It's like he was setting the stage for how we classify species even today.
Okay, get this. He wasn't just describing animals, he was dissecting them.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine figuring out that the heart has 3 cavities
Yeah,
with like the tools they had back then?
I know.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah. That really shows how committed he was to understanding
Yeah.
how living things actually worked
Uh,
on the inside,
yeah.
Of course, not all of his conclusions were perfect. For example, he thought that the heart was the seat of intelligence.
Yeah, some of his ideas were a little bit out there.
Yeah.
Like his explanation for why snakes don't like to go in the water.
Okay.
He actually thought that they were scared of seeing their own reflections.
Oh, interesting.
Like they'd see their jaw and be like, ah.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
got to give him credit. He was trying to figure things out.
Oh, totally. It's that spirit of inquiry that's
Right.
that's so important, right? He
Yeah.
was asking questions, making observations, trying to find those patterns.
Yeah,
It's like the very first version of the scientific method.
absolutely. And get this. It wasn't just about straightforward science for Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, this is the guy who also wrote Poetics.
Right.
A whole book
Yeah.
about poetry and drama.
Right.
You might not think those things go together, but when you...
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating about him. When
Mm.
you take a step back and look at the big picture, you see like a common thread running through all his work.
Right.
Whether it's biology or the arts,
Yeah.
he loved observing patterns, comparing things,
Right.
finding those unexpected connections.
So we have this brilliant mind, right?
Yeah.
Trying to make sense of the entire world,
Yeah.
from the tiniest little insect to the grandest works of art.
That's incredible.
I mean, it's pretty impressive, right?
Absolutely. It makes you wonder, what can we learn from Aristotle's way of thinking today?
Oh, that's a great question. And you know what? That's exactly what we're going to explore next. So we've talked about how Aristotle was like a super keen
Mm-hmm.
observer of the natural world, right?
Yeah.
But what really struck me when I was reading his stuff
Mhm.
was the sheer level of detail he went into.
Yeah. It's
Right?
amazing.
It wasn't just, like fish lay eggs.
Right.
It was more like, hold on a sec. Some of these eggs, they're hard and sandy,
Right.
but others are soft and squishy.
It's incredible.
Like, who even notices that, right? But it makes you realize just how closely he was paying attention.
It's true. His attention to detail was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just describing them either.
Right.
Remember his work on chicken embryos?
Oh, yeah.
He was basically tracking their development, like day by day.
Wow.
Noting when the heart appeared, the blood vessels, even the tiny limbs forming.
Hold on. He was watching embryos develop.
Oh, yeah.
That's incredible. I'm picturing him like hunched over these eggs,
Yeah.
taking like meticulous notes.
I know.
You know what else blew my mind?
What's that?
His observations about teeth
Oh, yeah.
and how their shape totally relates to what the animal eats.
Right.
I mean, it seems so obvious now,
Mhm.
but that connection, form and function,
Right.
that's like a fundamental principle in biology.
Absolutely. It's amazing how he picked up on these things.
He was fascinated by animal behavior, too.
Oh, tell me about it. Did you know that he wrote about how animals attract mates?
No way.
Build their nests, care for their young,
Wow.
even how they defend themselves from predators.
He was like creating the first like nature documentaries.
Totally. He was painting this picture of how animals live and interact with
Right.
their environment and each other.
And think about it. He did all of this without, high-tech cameras, tracking devices.
Yeah.
It really shows you the power of simple observation.
Yeah.
Like just really paying attention.
That's a lesson we can all take with us, right? Whether
Yeah.
we're, trying to understand a problem at work or just appreciating the beauty of nature,
Uh-huh.
taking the time to observe can reveal so much.
Okay, so we've seen that Aristotle was like a brilliant observer.
Yeah.
But, let's be real. Some of his conclusions,
Right.
they were, let's just say they wouldn't exactly pass in a modern biology class.
Yeah. We do have to keep in mind that he was working with the knowledge and tools available at the time.
Totally.
He didn't have the benefit of centuries of scientific advancement,
Right.
but, that doesn't diminish the value of his work at all.
Right.
He was a pioneer.
Yeah.
He paved the way for future scientists.
It's like he laid the foundation.
Exactly.
And even his mistakes,
Yeah.
they helped science to evolve, to move forward.
Yeah, it's like we're tracing the footsteps of a scientific pioneer and
Yeah.
seeing the triumphs
Right.
and the missteps along the way.
Right.
Speaking of moving forward, if Aristotle were around today,
Yeah.
what do you think he'd be most curious about?
Oh, that's a great question. Given how much he loved classifying, understanding life in all its forms,
Yeah.
I bet he'd be all over this idea of ecosystems.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like figuring out how all the pieces fit together.
Right.
From the tiniest bacteria
Yeah.
to the biggest whales.
And how changes in one part can affect the whole system.
Right.
Like a giant puzzle.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And think about climate change.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a global phenomenon affecting, every corner of the natural world.
Mm.
I could totally see Aristotle leading expeditions to study its impact
Yeah.
on different species.
Meticulously documenting every little change he observed.
Totally.
Yeah.
And can you imagine his reaction to the technology we have today?
Oh, my goodness.
Like tracking animal migrations across continents,
Oh, I know.
analyzing the DNA of entire populations.
Yeah, it would blow his mind.
I know.
He'd probably be in a lab somewhere dissecting new species,
Yeah.
coming up with groundbreaking theories.
Totally.
Speaking of theories, one thing that I always find fascinating
Yeah.
is how Aristotle's scientific ideas, they were so intertwined with his philosophical views. Remember his idea of the scala naturae,
Oh, yeah.
that hierarchy of life with humans at the very top?
Right. Right.
It's amazing how that idea, it shaped how people viewed the relationship between humans and the natural world for centuries.
Yeah. Of course, we now understand that evolution doesn't really work that way.
Right.
It's more like a branching tree of life.
Yeah.
But it's still so interesting to see how he tried to connect
Right there.
his scientific observations
Yeah.
with his philosophical beliefs.
Yeah.
You know.
It's a good reminder that science, it's never really objective, is it? It's
Yeah.
always influenced by the cultural and philosophical context of the
Right.
time.
So for all of us listening who are diving deep into these ancient texts,
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway from Aristotle's legacy?
Well, besides a newfound appreciation for chicken embryos,
Right.
I think Aristotle, he really teaches us the power of observation,
Uh-huh.
categorization, and,
Right.
and looking for patterns.
Right.
Those are skills that we can use in any field, not just science.
He also shows us that it's okay to be wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Science, it's all about trial and error.
Exactly.
It's about constantly questioning, testing, revising
Yeah.
our understanding of the world.
And maybe most importantly, Aristotle embodies that spirit of intellectual curiosity,
Yeah.
that deep desire to understand the universe
Right.
from the smallest creature to the biggest philosophical idea.
That's beautifully put.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's shift gears a little bit and
Okay.
explore one final thought-provoking question
Right.
inspired by Aristotle's work. So we've been talking about Aristotle's, amazing work studying animals,
Right.
his attention to detail, even some of his theories that, didn't quite pan out.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
if he were like suddenly transported to today's world.
Right.
What what kind of scientific mysteries would just like totally capture his imagination?
Knowing Aristotle, I don't think he would be satisfied
Right.
with just any mystery, right?
Right. He'd want to understand the underlying principles,
Yeah.
the connections, the why behind it all.
Totally.
I think he would be absolutely fascinated
Yeah.
by the complexity of ecosystems.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like this giant puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Figuring out how all the pieces fit together
Right.
from like the tiniest microorganisms to the biggest predators,
Right.
and how changes in one part
Yeah.
can like ripple through the whole system.
Exactly. And think about like climate change.
Oh yeah.
A global phenomenon that's affecting every corner of the natural world.
Right.
I can totally picture Aristotle
Yeah.
leading these expeditions
Yeah.
to study how climate change is impacting different species.
Right.
Just meticulously documenting
Right.
every little shift in their behavior, their distribution,
Yeah.
even their evolution in response to these changes.
He'd probably geek out over the technology we have today too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Like using satellite tracking to follow animal migrations across continents.
I know.
Or analyzing the DNA of entire populations
Yeah.
to see like how they're adapting.
It would blow his mind.
Right.
He might even be drawn to
Yeah.
the ethical questions that our scientific advancements have raised.
Really?
Things like genetic engineering or
Yeah.
using AI in biological research.
Mhm.
Remember, Aristotle was deeply concerned
Yeah.
with the relationship between humans and nature
Right.
and our responsibility as caretakers of the planet.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah,
He was as much a philosopher as he was a scientist.
absolutely.
Always, trying to understand humanity's place in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
It's like his scientific curiosity was fueled by this deeper purpose.
Yeah.
This search for meaning that went beyond just, collecting facts and making observations.
So maybe the true legacy of Aristotle's work isn't about, any one specific discovery,
Yeah.
but rather this enduring spirit of inquiry
Right.
that he embodies.
Yeah.
That drive to explore, to question, to connect the dots, to find meaning in the world around us.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And that's a challenge for all of us, right?
Yeah.
To keep that spark of curiosity alive.
Yeah.
To never stop asking questions.
Yeah.
To always be open to new discoveries.
Absolutely.
Whether we're reading ancient texts or, exploring the latest scientific breakthroughs, the world is full of wonders waiting to be uncovered.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Aristotle.
Yeah.
It's been a fascinating journey exploring the mind of this, ancient trailblazer.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and remember, stay curious.